So this actually really annoyed me, and I haven't thought about this issue for a long time. Unpopular opinion: men's domestic violence shelters are a misuse of non-profit funding. Imagine being such a piece of shit that you would say that, right? News came out this month that a domestic violence shelter for male survivors opened in Arkansas. According to the article, is the first shelter for male survivors in the country. Just, it's not looking good for you, Steve, I'm just saying. Several people on my Facebook newsfeed posted this news happily, and while the increase in resources for domestic violence survivors is a good thing, this was for men. I think we need to be careful about how we get too excited about this. Listen to this. Before I get too Debbie Downer, I want to first acknowledge that male survivors of domestic violence are a real and important thing, and that male survivors face stigma over other gendered issues that women don't. Men that have survived domestic violence should have resources. And in a perfect world, there would be shelters for men everywhere they are needed. But the problem is we don't live in a perfect world, so get fucked. Just feminist activists arguing against men's domestic violence shelters. I mean, it's just part of a pattern, isn't it? Just a widespread societal pattern across pretty much the entire English-speaking world, where feminist activists will actually campaign against something. And like something like this, like men's shelters and stuff like that. So this author accepts that men's domestic violence is a real and dangerous and important thing, but they just don't want the money to go for it. Why? Because there are more female domestic violence survivors. Well, I mean, I guess if there aren't enough battered men, then we won't bother doing anything for any of the battered men. I mean, it's only like this was the one domestic violence shelter for men that was being opened, but don't fucking worry about that. I am perhaps especially wary of domestic violence shelters for men because one of men's rights activists' rallying cries is, why aren't there domestic violence shelters for men? I don't see a problem with that question. Who cares if that's what they say? What's wrong with that? They ask this without ever acknowledging the whole reason that interpersonal violence is even seen as problematic in the first place is because of feminism. Oh yeah, because before then everyone was just like, just smack a bitch. Just punch her right in her fucking face. And if she punches you back, well, don't worry about it. You're a man, you can just walk it off. And I love that feminists are doing everything in their power to make that stop, to make men's domestic violence shelters not a thing. Why would there be an article on Salon.com saying feminism didn't kill men's rights advocate Earl Silverman? Oh, it's just because he had mental health issues, is it? Right, I get it. This is an article by Paul Elam, so it's a bit more hyperbolic than you might prefer, but I do think feminists had something to do with his death. He quotes the ending paragraph of her article. Feminism wasn't the cause of Silverman's death. Instead, his story seems to be that of a man whose demons had long plagued him. In last month, he prepared to shut his shelter. He said that when he'd left his marriage 2 decades earlier, he was frustrated not by merely the lack of services for men, but the default narrative of male as abuser. I wonder who perpetuates that. When I went into the community looking for some support services, I couldn't find any. Oh, just so you know, Silverman was abused by his wife. That's why he left her. There was a lot for women, and the only programs were for anger management. As a victim, I was re-victimized by having these services tell me that I wasn't a victim, but I was a perpetrator. I basically tried to commit suicide because I couldn't do anything. Oh, what's that? A feminist system is locking a man out of getting the help he needs to the point where he actually ends up killing himself. Got nothing to do with feminism, though. I mean, nothing to do with feminism. What could that possibly have to do with feminism? The thing is, I spoke to Erin Pizzi, who knew Earl Silverman, and she was the one who told me in a live stream that, yes, feminists had hounded and bullied and made every attempt to defund using whatever legal means they had their grubby little hands on to get him defeated in this way. Because that's how they see this. For them, this is a war against men, an ideological war. They want all of the resources, and they don't want men to have any of the resources, despite the fact that men are the majority taxpayers, just so you know. It's honestly, the idea that this is not a feminist system is baffling. Feminists are getting everything they fucking want. There is no resistance to feminism. And now intersectional feminism, intersectional social justice, the form that is truly metastasized into. There is simply no resistance to it. And anyone who resists it is called a bigot. It's not that they might have genuine problems. And Earl actually, in his suicide note, he says He's killing himself to draw attention to the issues that he couldn't do in life, hoping that this would be something that would mean something. But don't worry, Destiny. Don't worry, it's not a feminist system or anything. And then we have the Duluth model, the most common batterer intervention program in the United States. It's based in feminist theory, positing that domestic violence is the result of patriarchal ideology, in which the men are encouraged and expected to control their partners. That sounds fair. The feminist theory underlying the Duluth model is that men use violence within relationships to exercise power and control. Why is it then that almost half of domestic violence victims are men? Doesn't really matter though, does it, Steve? I mean, this isn't indicative of feminist influence over society or anything. That's literally causing men to go beaten and bruised and bloodied, and it simply doesn't matter to anyone, because in the philosophy underpinning it, men cannot be the victims and are always the perpetrators. I mean, it's not like this is just a problem or anything that we need to root out of our societies if we want to have any kind of equal, egalitarian society. This isn't indicative of the control of ideologues in a realm that nobody else was challenging. No, no, no. It's a silly thing to suggest that feminism might be having a detrimental effect on men.